Welcome to Buddha's Healing, a quiet place where we gently explore the wisdom of the Buddha and learn how to care for the heart, calm the mind, and live with greater peace in every season of life. Dear friends, there comes a season of life that feels different. Quieter, slower, more reflective for many people. That season begins sometime after 60, not suddenly. Not all at once, but gently, almost invisibly. You wake up one morning and realize life feels different now. The body moves differently, energy shifts, sleep changes, the house feels quieter, time feels more precious. And perhaps for the first time, you begin paying attention to your emotional world in ways you never had before. Many people assume declining health after 60 is simply part of aging. And yes, the body naturally changes. The Buddha taught us that all things are impermanent. The body grows older, strength rises and falls. Seasons change. Nothing stays exactly the same forever. But dear friends, here is something important that often goes unnoticed. Not every form of suffering after 60 comes from aging alone. Sometimes the body is carrying emotional weight that has quietly accumulated over decades. Worry, regret, loneliness, fear, old resentment, unspoken sadness, the exhaustion of pretending to be okay. And because these emotional habits often grow slowly, many people never notice the cost, at least not at first. They simply think, I guess this is just aging. I am just getting tired. Maybe this is normal now. But what if part of the exhaustion is not age? What if part of the heaviness comes from emotional patterns the heart has carried for too long? Have you ever met someone in their 70s who feels deeply alive? Their eyes still shine. Their laughter feels soft and genuine. Their spirit feels peaceful. And then, you meet someone much younger who already seems emotionally exhausted. Quickly irritated, constantly anxious, unable to rest, heavy inside. What creates the difference? Sometimes health, sometimes circumstance, but often something deeper, the emotional atmosphere living inside the heart. Because emotions do not simply disappear, the body listens, the nervous system listens, the heart remembers. Stress leaves traces, loneliness leaves traces, fear leaves traces, resentment leaves traces, and over time, what the heart carries quietly begins shaping how life feels, especially after 60, when emotional exhaustion becomes harder to hide. Perhaps you know this feeling tired even after sleeping, feeling emotionally drained for no clear reason, feeling heavy, restless, anxious, disconnected, sometimes even lonely around people you love, and perhaps you wonder, what happened to me? Why do I feel this way? Why does peace feel harder to find? Dear friends, please hear this gently. You are not failing, you are not broken, and no, it may not simply be old age sometimes. The heart is simply tired. Tired from carrying too much for too long. The Buddha taught something deeply compassionate. Suffering grows when we are unaware of what the mind keeps repeating. Emotional habits matter. Thought patterns matter. What we repeatedly hold in the heart quietly shapes the life we experience. And after 60, many people begin harvesting what has quietly been planted inside for years. Habits of peace create softness. Habits of gratitude create steadiness. But habits of fear, habits of resentment, habits of emotional suppression, these can quietly drain joy, energy, even health today. We are going to gently reflect on 7 emotional habits. Many people over 60 unknowingly carry habits that may quietly affect emotional well-being. Inner peace, sleep, relationships, and even physical health more than they realize. Not to create fear, not to create guilt, but to create awareness, because awareness is the beginning of healing together. We will gently explore things such as chronic worrying, holding onto resentment, loneliness hidden behind strength, overthinking the past, trying to control everything, suppressing emotions instead of expressing them, and one of the quietest struggles of all after retirement or later life transitions, losing a sense of meaning and purpose. Perhaps as we reflect today, you may recognize parts of yourself, and if you do, please be gentle. This is not about blame. This is about compassion because, dear friends, most people are doing the best they can with the emotional tools they were given. Many people over 60 grew up learning how to survive, how to sacrifice, how to stay strong, how to carry responsibility, but very few people were taught how to emotionally rest, how to release, how to soften, how to ask for support, how to care for the heart as gently as they cared for everyone else. And perhaps this season of life is quietly asking something new from you, not more pressure, not more struggle, but gentleness, stillness, compassion. Perhaps healing after 60 is not about fixing everything. Perhaps it is about carrying less, holding less, fighting less, and resting more deeply inside yourself. So before we continue, take one slow breath, let your shoulders soften, and gently ask yourself, what emotional habit has quietly been living in my heart for too long? Because sometimes the thing quietly hurting our health is not only what is happening in the body. Sometimes it is the emotional burden we never realized we were still carrying. Let us begin with the first emotional habit many people quietly carry after 61, so common that most people no longer even notice it. And that habit is chronic worrying, not ordinary concern, not healthy planning, but the kind of worry that quietly becomes a lifestyle. The kind that never fully rests, the kind that follows you into the morning, sits beside you at lunch, and waits beside your bed at night. After 60, worry often changes shape. When we are younger, we worry about work, bills, children, deadlines, but later in life, the worries become more personal: health, aging, retirement, memory, loneliness, losing independence, the future of family, the fear of becoming a burden, and perhaps one of the quietest fears of all, what happens as I grow older? Dear friends, please hear this gently. These fears are deeply human. You are not weak for having them. You are not failing. You are simply human. The Buddha understood fear. He understood uncertainty. He understood suffering. But he also taught something deeply wise. Fear becomes suffering when it begins living in the mind without rest. Many people after 60 quietly spend enormous emotional energy worrying about things that have not happened yet. A health issue that may never come, a financial fear that may never happen, a future loneliness that has not yet arrived. And over time, the nervous system grows tired, very tired, the body feels heavy, sleep becomes lighter, joy becomes harder to feel, patience becomes thinner, even beautiful moments feel interrupted. A quiet dinner becomes worry about tomorrow. Time with grandchildren becomes worry about health. A peaceful evening becomes fear about the future. And slowly, life becomes emotionally crowded, not because danger is happening now, but because the mind never stops preparing for it. Dear friends, how exhausting that becomes, to constantly prepare for storms that may never arrive. And perhaps many people listening today know exactly how this feels. The body may be sitting peacefully in a chair, yet the mind is somewhere frightening, 10 years ahead, worst-case scenarios, imagined problems, future loss. And after enough years, the body quietly begins carrying the emotional cost. The Buddha often invited people back to the present moment. Not because tomorrow does not matter, but because tomorrow cannot be lived today. And suffering often grows when the mind abandons the moment it is actually in. How often do we miss peace because we are mentally somewhere else, watching a sunset, yet worrying? Sitting beside family, yet worrying, lying safely in bed, yet worrying, dear friends. Worry rarely protects peace. More often, it steals it. Many people believe worry proves love. If I stop worrying about my family, maybe I don't care enough. But love and worry are not the same thing. Love supports, love shows up. Love listens. Worry mentally suffers in advance. Worry imagines disaster repeatedly. Worry quietly drains emotional energy. And perhaps the hardest part, many people confuse exhaustion with responsibility. They say, "This is just who I am. I've always been a worrier." But dear friends, a lifelong habit does not mean a healthy habit. The Buddha gently reminded people again and again, peace is found in returning to this moment, this breath, this conversation, this ordinary day, because, dear friends, most of life quietly unfolds in simple moments we accidentally miss while fearing tomorrow. Imagine carrying a backpack filled with stones everywhere you go. At first, you adjust, you become used to the weight. But eventually, the shoulders ache, energy fades, walking feels harder. Worry works the same way. At first, it feels responsible. Then slowly, it becomes emotional weight. Years pass, and many people no longer notice how much heaviness they carry. They simply feel tired, flat, emotionally worn down, unable to fully relax, always slightly tense, always preparing, always scanning for problems. And perhaps the deepest sadness is this: life continues happening while the mind remains trapped somewhere else. A child laughs, a sunset glows, a warm meal sits on the table, someone says, "I love you," and yet fear steals the moment. Dear friends, please hear this gently. You cannot solve tomorrow tonight. You cannot prevent every hardship. You cannot emotionally rehearse your way into safety. And perhaps you no longer need to carry every possible future all at once. Maybe tonight, before sleep, you place a hand gently over your heart, take one slow breath, and quietly whisper, "I have carried enough for today. Tomorrow can wait. This moment deserves my presence." Sometimes, healing begins this simply. One softer breath, one quieter thought, one moment of finally allowing the mind to rest. There was a man named Thomas. He was 68 years old, living in a small coastal town in South Carolina with his wife Helen. Most people would have described Thomas as responsible, dependable, the kind of man who always prepared for problems before they happened. He worked hard his whole life, paid bills on time, saved carefully, protected his family, planned ahead. And for many years, those qualities served him well. But after retirement, something changed. The responsibilities became quieter. Yet strangely, his mind became louder. Every morning, Thomas woke up and immediately started worrying. Before even getting out of bed, what if his savings weren't enough? What if inflation kept getting worse? What if he got sick? What if Helen became ill? What if one of the grandchildren struggled? What if something happened to the house? What if? The worries never truly stopped. At breakfast, Helen would pour coffee and smile softly. "It's a beautiful morning," she'd say. Thomas would nod, but inside, his mind was already somewhere frightening. Bills, worst-case scenarios, retirement fears, medical costs, future problems, even during peaceful moments. His body stayed tense, always preparing, always bracing. One afternoon, while sitting on the porch overlooking the ocean, Helen gently asked, "Can I ask you something?" Thomas nodded. Are you ever actually here? He looked confused. What do you mean? She smiled sadly. Ray always worried about tomorrow, but sometimes she paused. I miss you today. The sentence landed quietly but deeply. That evening, Thomas sat alone after dinner. No television, no phone, just silence. And for the first time in a long while, he asked himself an uncomfortable question. When was the last time I actually felt at peace? The answer surprised him. He couldn't remember. Not really. Not fully, because even good moments had become interrupted by fear. Family dinners, vacations, holidays, sunsets, all quietly invaded by worry. Weeks later, during a routine doctor's appointment, his physician reviewed test results. Nothing alarming, but stress levels were clearly affecting him. Poor sleep, higher blood pressure. Fatigue, the doctor asked gently. Thomas, what's weighing on you? Thomas laughed awkwardly. Oh, nothing unusual. Just life. The doctor leaned back, then said something simple. Sometimes people your age aren't tired because they old. They tired because they've been emotionally carrying too much for too long. That sentence stayed with him. A few weeks later, Helen invited Thomas to join her for a mindfulness group at a local community center. At first he resisted. That stuff's not really for me, he said, but eventually, mostly for Helen, he agreed. The room surprised him. Simple chairs, warm lighting, no pressure, no preaching, just quiet conversation. At one point, the teacher said something that immediately caught his attention. Worry often feels responsible. But responsibility without rest becomes suffering. Thomas sat very still. Then came another sentence. Most people spend their lives preparing for storms that never arrive. Something inside him shifted. Because suddenly, he realized how much life he had missed while mentally preparing for disaster. Then the teacher asked a question. What if peace is not found when problems disappear, but when you stop demanding certainty from life? That question stayed with Thomas for days, then weeks. Slowly, something began changing, not dramatically. Just gently, before bed, instead of spiraling into anxious thoughts, Thomas started writing worries in a notebook. Then closing it, almost like telling his mind, enough for today. When fear arrived, he practiced breathing instead of predicting disaster. When worries about money surfaced, he reminded himself, we're okay today. When health fears came, he gently returned to the present moment. This moment is okay. Little by little, something softened, sleep improved, his shoulders relaxed, he laughed more. Even Helen noticed. One evening while watching the sunset, she smiled softly. You seem lighter lately. Thomas laughed quietly. I think I finally got tired of scaring myself. Then he paused and added, you were right. I wasn't really here. Helen reached for his hand. Well, she smiled. You're here now, and perhaps for the first time in years. Thomas truly was, not in tomorrow, not in fear, not in imagined problems, but here, in the quiet beauty of an ordinary evening. Dear friends, perhaps there is a Thomas somewhere inside many of us, a heart quietly exhausted from carrying tomorrow before it arrives. A mind that loves deeply, yet worries endlessly. Please hear this gently. Your love is beautiful, your care matters. But worry is not the same thing as protection. Fear cannot guarantee safety. Anxiety cannot prevent suffering. And mentally suffering in advance rarely prepares us for life. It only exhausts the spirit. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to trust this moment. You are allowed to stop carrying every possible future all at once. Perhaps after 60, the invitation is not to control tomorrow. Perhaps the invitation is softer, to finally learn how to live today. Dear friends, Let us gently move into the second emotional habit after 60 that quietly damages health, often without people fully realizing it. And that habit is holding on to resentment for too long, old hurt, old disappointment, old anger, sometimes carried so quietly. No one else even notices, but the heart notices, the body notices, and over time, peace slowly disappears. Perhaps someone hurt you years ago, a spouse betrayed your trust, a friendship ended painfully, a family relationship fractured. A child stopped calling, a sibling disappointed you, or perhaps life itself did not unfold the way you hoped. And even now, years later, something inside still aches. Please hear this gently. Pain is real, disappointment is real, grief is real. The Buddha never asked us to pretend suffering did not happen. He never asked us to smile through pain or deny heartbreak. Instead, he invited people to understand suffering, to sit beside it with awareness, with compassion. But dear friends, there is a quiet difference between feeling pain and living inside pain. Pain visits. Resentment stays, pain hurts. Resentment repeats, pain asks for healing. Resentment quietly keeps the wound open. And after 60, many people begin carrying emotional histories that have never fully healed. Divorce, family conflict, betrayal, regret, broken trust, words spoken long ago that somehow still echo inside the heart. And often, the emotional habit becomes invisible, so familiar that it feels normal. I'll never forgive them. They ruined everything. I can let that go after what happened. Dear friends, these reactions are understandable. Very understandable. But today, we gently ask something deeper. What is holding onto this pain costing you now? Because resentment does not stay quietly in the mind. It touches the body too. Tension, restlessness, sleep difficulties, fatigue, irritability, emotional heaviness, sometimes even loneliness. Because emotional walls built for protection often become emotional prisons. The Buddha once compared anger to holding a burning coal with the intention of throwing it at someone else. Before it harms another person, it burns the hand holding it, and resentment often works exactly the same way. At first, it feels protective. Later, it becomes exhausting. Today, we gently reflect on this question. What pain have you been carrying longer than necessary? The Buddha taught again and again that attachment creates suffering. And one of the hardest attachments to release is attachment to emotional pain, not because people want to suffer, but because hurt becomes familiar, predictable, part of identity. Some people quietly begin building their lives around old wounds. This happened to me. This is why I struggle. This is why I don't trust. This is why I keep distance. And slowly, pain becomes permanent residence in the heart. Dear friends, forgiveness is often misunderstood. Many people think forgiveness means saying, "What happened was okay," but forgiveness is not approval. Forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgiveness is not pretending pain never existed. Forgiveness simply whispers, "I no longer want this pain controlling my peace." And sometimes, that decision changes everything. Because resentment often promises strength, but secretly, it steals energy, it steals softness, it steals joy. And eventually, it steals peace. Imagine carrying a heavy suitcase everywhere you go, every room, every season. Every year at first, you barely notice it. Eventually, the body aches, walking becomes harder, energy fades. Resentment works this way. At first, the pain feels justified, then it becomes habit, then emotional identity, then exhaustion. And perhaps the saddest part, many people grow so used to carrying emotional pain. They forget what lightness even feels like. Dear friends, please hear this gently. You do not have to deny what happened. You do not have to excuse someone else's actions. You do not have to force healing. But perhaps you no longer need to relive the same wound every day. Because peace matters too. Sleep matters too. Your health matters too. Your remaining years matter too. Perhaps tonight, you might quietly ask yourself, has holding on to this resentment protected me, or has it quietly exhausted me? Sometimes, the beginning of healing is not dramatic. Sometimes, healing begins with one honest whisper, I am tired of carrying this. There was a woman named Patricia. She was 70 years old, living alone in a quiet neighborhood outside Boston. From the outside, Patricia looked strong, independent, capable, the kind of woman who had survived difficult things and kept moving forward. She volunteered at the local library, went to church on Sundays, took long walks through the neighborhood, always smiled politely when people asked how she was doing, and if anyone asked, how are you? She always gave the same answer. Oh, I am fine. But the truth, Patricia had been carrying a hurt for nearly 20 years, a resentment she never fully admitted to herself. Toward her daughter, Melissa, the distance between them had not happened overnight. It began slowly. Small misunderstandings, different opinions, old family tensions, miscommunication, hurt feelings never fully discussed. Then came one painful argument, words spoken in anger, tears, silence. After that, things changed. Calls became shorter, visits became rare, birthdays turned awkward, and eventually, months passed between conversations. Patricia often told herself, she's the one who pulled away. She hurt me. She should apologize, and perhaps part of that was true. Perhaps Melissa had caused real pain, but something else quietly happened too. Patricia never stopped replaying the story. Late at night, she revisited the same memories, the same argument, the same disappointment, the same hurt. Again and again and again, she imagined different conversations, different endings, different apologies. Sometimes she imagined Melissa calling. Sometimes she imagined finally saying everything she had kept inside. But mostly, she sat with sadness, heavy sadness, a sadness she rarely named. Over time, her health began changing. Nothing dramatic, just subtle things, poor sleep, low energy, a heaviness in the chest, tension, headaches, loneliness, an emotional tiredness she could not explain. One afternoon at a doctor's appointment, her physician gently asked, how have you been emotionally? Patricia smiled politely. Oh, fine, but something about the question lingered. Emotionally, how had she been emotionally? The truth, lonely, angry, tired, heartbroken, and quietly grieving a relationship she still missed. A few months later, a neighbor invited Patricia to a small mindfulness group at a community center. Normally, she would have said no. But something inside felt tired enough to try. The teacher that evening spoke softly, nothing dramatic. No pressure, just quiet honesty. At one point, he said something that made Patricia sit up straighter. Sometimes we continue suffering long after the painful moment has ended. The room grew quiet. Then he continued. Not because pain is still happening, but because we continue carrying it. Patricia felt tears rising unexpectedly. Then came another sentence, a sentence that somehow found its way directly into her heart. Forgiveness does not mean the wound never mattered. It simply means you no longer want pain to control your remaining years. Remaining years, the phrase stayed with her because suddenly, she realized something painful. She had spent almost 20 years emotionally replaying one broken relationship. 20 years, and quietly. It had stolen more peace than she wanted to admit. That evening, Patricia sat alone at her kitchen table. No television, no distractions, just silence and memory. She thought about Melissa as a little girl. Birthday parties, school concerts, road trips, laughter, bedtime stories, and suddenly, the resentment felt different. Still painful, but softer, because underneath the anger, there was love. There had always been love. A week later, Patricia wrote a letter, not perfect, not polished, just honest. She wrote, "Melissa, I don't know how we got so far apart. I know we both got hurt. Maybe I held onto that hurt for too long. I miss you." She almost didn't send it. Twice she nearly tore it up, but eventually, she mailed it. Weeks passed, no response, and strangely, even so, something inside already felt lighter, because for the first time in years, she had stopped fighting herself. Then one afternoon, her phone rang. Melissa. Patricia almost didn't answer, hands shaking, heart racing. Finally she picked up. Silence, then a soft voice. "Mom." Tears came instantly, not dramatic healing. Not perfect reconciliation, just honesty, awkwardness, sadness, love, and a beginning. Months later, things still weren't perfect. Healing rarely happens perfectly, but calls returned, lunches happened, grandchildren visited, laughter slowly returned, and unexpectedly, so did something else. Patricia felt healthier. Lighter. She slept better, smiled more, felt softer inside. One afternoon while gardening, she suddenly realized something important. The pain had never disappeared, but she had finally stopped feeding it, and somehow, that changed everything. Dear friends, perhaps there is a Patricia somewhere inside many of us, an old hurt, a disappointment, a story we replay quietly when no one is watching. Please hear this gently. Your pain matters, your heartbreak matters, but so does your peace, and perhaps your remaining years deserve softness too. You do not have to force forgiveness. Healing is slow, tender, human, but maybe you no longer need to carry old pain every single day. Because resentment rarely protects us forever. Eventually, it simply becomes heavy, and after 60, heavy things become harder to carry. Sometimes, the beginning of healing sounds like this: "I am tired of suffering this way." And perhaps, that honest whisper becomes the first step toward peace. If today's reflection touched your heart, please subscribe to Buddha's Healing and continue walking this healing journey with us. And if there is something painful your heart has carried for too long, perhaps leave a gentle comment below. Healing often begins when we stop suffering in silence. Let us gently move into the third emotional habit after 60 that quietly harms health, often without people fully noticing it. And that habit is loneliness hidden behind strength. This kind of loneliness is quiet, invisible, easy to misunderstand, because loneliness is not always about being physically alone. Sometimes, it is feeling emotionally alone, feeling unseen, unheard, misunderstood, feeling that somehow life has grown quieter than the heart expected. After 60, many people quietly experience this. Children grow up, friends move away, communities change. Retirement shifts daily routines, loved ones pass on, and little by little, life becomes quieter, sometimes too quiet. The house feels different, meals feel smaller, weekends feel longer, evenings feel heavier, phone calls happen less often. And sometimes, without warning, a strange ache settles into the heart, not dramatic sadness, just heaviness. Emptiness, disconnection, the quiet feeling of, no one really understands what this season feels like. Dear friends, please hear this gently. Loneliness is deeply human. It is not weakness. It is not failure. It is not something to feel ashamed of. The Buddha often emphasized the importance of connection. compassion, spiritual friendship, community, because suffering becomes heavier when carried completely alone. And after 60, many people stop talking honestly about what hurts, not because pain disappears, but because they do not want to burden others. They say, everyone is busy, my children have their own lives, I should be grateful, I don't want to complain. And slowly, silence grows, the heart becomes quieter but not more peaceful, just more alone. Many people after 60 become experts at appearing okay, smiling, staying polite, keeping routines, watching television, staying busy but quietly. The heart still longs for warmth, conversation, presence. To feel needed, to feel remembered, to feel emotionally close to someone, dear friends. Loneliness can quietly affect health in ways people rarely expect. Sleep becomes lighter, energy fades, anxiety rises, joy feels harder to access, the body feels heavier, motivation disappears. And many people do not even recognize loneliness as part of what they are feeling. They simply say, I am tired all the time. I don't feel like myself. Life just feels different now. Perhaps the heart is simply asking for connection. Today, we gently reflect on this question. What happens when strength becomes emotional isolation? The Buddha taught that all beings are interconnected. No heart thrives completely alone. No soul heals in total isolation. And yet, many people quietly spend years pretending loneliness does not affect them, especially after loss. After retirement, after children move away, after grief reshapes life, some people slowly stop reaching out. Stop sharing honestly. Stop asking for companionship. Stop allowing themselves emotional vulnerability. Because vulnerability feels uncomfortable, risky, embarrassing, but dear friends, silence often deepens loneliness. The truth is, most human hearts are quietly longing for the same thing: connection, kindness, to feel seen, to feel safe, to feel remembered. The Buddha gently reminded people again and again, compassion matters, community matters, human connection matters, and sometimes, healing begins with something surprisingly simple. A conversation, a shared meal, a returned phone call, a walk with someone who listens, or simply hearing the words, "You are not alone." There is an important difference between solitude and loneliness. Solitude can nourish peace. Loneliness quietly drains it. Solitude feels chosen. Loneliness feels unwanted. Solitude restores. Loneliness exhausts. And perhaps, one of the hardest forms of loneliness after 60 is invisible loneliness. Being surrounded by people, yet still feeling emotionally unseen. Being in relationships, yet feeling emotionally disconnected. Talking but never feeling truly heard. Dear friends, sometimes the strongest people are quietly hurting the most. The people who always say, I am fine. The people who never ask for help. The people who continue showing up while carrying silent sadness. Perhaps tonight, you may gently ask yourself, have I been feeling lonelier than I admit? Have I mistaken emotional isolation for strength? What small step toward connection could I allow myself? Sometimes, healing begins with something very small. A text message, a phone call, joining a community, opening your heart 1 inch wider because, dear friends, no heart was meant to carry life completely alone. There was a man named George. He was 72 years old, living alone in a quiet neighborhood outside Minneapolis. If you met George for the first time, you might think he was doing just fine. He still drove himself everywhere, kept his lawn perfectly trimmed, paid his bills on time, smiled politely at neighbors, went to the grocery store every Saturday morning, and whenever someone asked, "How are you doing?" George always gave the same answer. "Oh, can T complain?" Then he would smile, a small smile, the kind people give when they do not want to explain too much. But the truth, George had been lonely for a very long time, ever since his wife, Margaret, passed away 6 years earlier. They had been married for 43 years, 43 years of shared mornings, shared dinners, shared jokes, shared routines, shared silence, and then suddenly, silence became something completely different. The house changed. At first, people visited often, friends stopped by, neighbors checked in, family called. Meals were dropped off, cards arrived, people said, "Let us know if you need anything," but as months passed, life moved on for everyone else. The visits became less frequent, the phone grew quieter, the evenings grew longer. And somehow, George never quite learned how to talk about it. He told himself, "I should be grateful. Other people have it worse. No use complaining," so instead, he stayed busy, television in the background. Long drives, trips to the hardware store he did not really need, cleaning things twice, fixing things that were already fine. Anything to avoid sitting too long with the silence, but loneliness has a way of showing up anyway. At dinner time, in quiet mornings, in empty rooms, during holidays, on birthdays, in ordinary moments no one else sees. Over time, George noticed something changing. Sleep became harder, energy disappeared, the house felt heavier. Even simple tasks felt strangely exhausting. Some days, he did not feel like talking to anyone. Other days, he wished someone would simply ask, "How are you really doing?" But he never said that aloud. Because George had spent his whole life being strong, and strong people, he believed, did not talk about loneliness. One Sunday afternoon, his daughter Rachel came to visit. While making coffee in the kitchen, she looked at him quietly and asked, "Dad, how are you really?" George immediately smiled. "Oh, I am okay," but Rachel stayed quiet, then softly said, "No, really." Something about the way she asked made it harder to hide. George looked down at his coffee, then quietly whispered, "It gets lonely." The word surprised even him. Rachel reached across the table, held his hand, and for the first time in years, George cried, not dramatic crying, just tired tears. The kind that had waited too long. A few weeks later, Rachel gently encouraged him to join a local community group for seniors. At first, George refused, "Not really my thing," but eventually, mostly to make Rachel stop asking, he agreed. The first meeting felt awkward, uncomfortable, small talk, coffee, name tags. He nearly left early. But then, an older man across the room sat beside him and said, "You lose your wife too?" George nodded. The man sighed softly. "Yeah, hardest thing I ever went through." For a moment, neither of them spoke. But strangely, George felt understood, really understood. No pretending, no polite answers, no pressure to be fine. Just honesty. Week after week, George kept showing up. Slowly, conversations became friendships, coffee after meetings, lunches, phone calls, stories, laughter, shared grief, shared understanding, and something unexpected happened. The loneliness softened, not disappeared, but softened. George still missed Margaret deeply, some days still hurt. But life no longer felt so silent. One afternoon while gardening, George suddenly realized something surprising. The pain of loss had stayed, but the isolation had changed, and somehow, that changed everything. Months later, Rachel visited again. "You seem different," she smiled. George laughed softly. "How? You seem lighter." George paused, then quietly said, "I think I forgot people still needed people, and maybe he had forgotten something else too." That strength was never meant to mean suffering alone. Dear friends, Perhaps there is a George somewhere inside many of us. Someone quietly carrying loneliness without words, someone appearing strong while hurting silently. Please hear this gently. Loneliness is not weakness. Missing connection is not weakness. Needing companionship is not weakness. It is deeply human. You were never meant to carry life entirely alone. And perhaps the strongest thing you can do is not hide the loneliness. Perhaps strength begins with honesty, with one phone call, one conversation, one step toward connection, because healing often happens in relationship, in shared understanding. In moments where someone simply says, "I understand," and perhaps tonight, you might gently ask yourself, where in my life have I stopped reaching out? Who could I let in just a little? Because, dear friends, even after 60, even after loss, even after heartbreak, connection still heals, dear friends. As we gently come to the end of today's reflection, perhaps the most important truth to remember is this. Growing older is not only a journey of the body, it is also a journey of the heart. After 60, life changes. The body changes, relationships change, routines change. The world grows quieter in ways we never expected. And often, without even realizing it, emotional habits quietly begin shaping how we feel, how we sleep, how we heal, how we experience peace. Today, we reflected on emotional habits many people carry silently after 60. Chronic worry, resentment, loneliness hidden behind strength, invisible emotional patterns that slowly become heavy over time. Not because anyone intends to suffer, not because life has gone wrong, but because emotional burdens are easy to ignore when we spend decades simply trying to survive. Many people over 60 have lived through so much: responsibilities, heartbreak, loss, sacrifice, unexpected endings, financial stress, family struggles, health fears, and somehow still kept going, still showed up, still carried others, still tried to be strong. Dear friends, that matters. Please take a moment to honor how much you have carried. Because perhaps no one says this enough. You have been carrying a lot, more than most people know. And maybe, just maybe, you deserve gentleness now, not guilt, not pressure, not endless emotional responsibility, but gentleness, compassion, rest. The Buddha gently reminded people again and again, suffering grows heavier when we cling too tightly. To fear, to pain, to loneliness, to stories the mind repeats endlessly, not because we are weak, but because carrying emotional weight for too long exhausts even the strongest heart. And perhaps this season of life is quietly inviting something different. Not more struggle, not more emotional battles, not more pretending to be okay, but honesty, softness, healing. Perhaps this chapter asks, can you worry a little less? Can you stop replaying old pain? Can you allow yourself connection? Can you stop carrying tomorrow every single day? Can you finally be kinder to yourself? Dear friends, healing after 60 may not look dramatic. Sometimes healing looks surprisingly simple. A slower morning, a walk in fresh air, a deeper breath, a returned phone call, a quiet prayer, a softer conversation. A moment of stillness, a willingness to say, I do not want to suffer this way anymore. And perhaps the greatest wisdom of later life is not learning how to carry more. Perhaps it is learning how to carry less. Less fear, less resentment, less emotional loneliness, less pressure, less unnecessary heaviness. Because peace rarely arrives through force. Peace often arrives softly, quietly, like sunlight through a window. Like forgiveness arriving slowly. Like finally breathing deeply after holding tension for years. Dear friends, please remember this. You are not broken for feeling tired. You are not weak for feeling lonely. You are not failing for worrying. You are human, and being human sometimes means carrying pain longer than we meant to, but healing remains possible. Even now, especially now, because peace does not belong only to younger years. Peace still belongs to you. After 60, after loss, after disappointment, after heartbreak, after mistakes, after all the ways life did not go according to plan, you are still allowed peace. You are still allowed joy. You are still allowed softness, and perhaps tonight, before sleep, you place a hand gently over your heart, take one slow breath, and quietly ask yourself, what emotional habit am I finally ready to release? What burden no longer belongs in this season of my life? How can I be gentler with myself tomorrow? Because, dear friends, sometimes healing does not begin with changing the entire life. Sometimes healing begins with one small decision, to stop carrying everything alone. If today's reflection brought even a small sense of comfort, please subscribe to Buddha's Healing and continue this journey of mindfulness, healing, and inner peace with us. And if there is an emotional burden your heart has quietly carried for too long, feel free to gently share it in the comments. Sometimes healing begins the moment we realize we are not alone. May your heart grow lighter, may your sleep become softer, and may peace gently find its way back to you. One quiet breath at a time.